All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started today. Good afternoon. Welcome to the International Seminar Series. My name is Matt Schwab, and I'm the Program Director for the International House and Special Programs here at Illinois State University. On behalf of the Office of International Engagement, I would like to formally welcome you all to our second to last session of the Spring 2022 International Seminar Series titled ISU International Engagement. This series is one of many programs developed by our office to assist in comprehensive campus internationalization and emphasize the benefits of social, cultural, and campus knowledge or linguistic knowledge beyond what is represented in our home countries. This semester, the series focuses on the wide variety of internationalization efforts here at Illinois State University. This semester, all events are available as Zoom webinars. As an attendee, you can submit questions through the webinar Q&A function, which we will relay to the presenter after their presentation. Also, if you have questions or concerns for our staff, please put them in the chat and we will be happy to assist you as best we can. It is now my distinct pleasure to welcome today's speakers, Dr. Terry, Noel, and Janet Tulley, who will be talking about international institutional collaborations. Dr. Noel is the Associate Dean of Academic Programs and Curriculum in the College of Business at Illinois State University. Dr. Noel's business background includes farming, business ownership, sales management, and consulting. He earned his doctorate from the University of Colorado Boulder. His work has been published in such places as the Academy of Management Journal, the Journal of Management Education, and the Journal of Entrepreneurship Education. He often speaks to groups on the topics of creativity and improvisational leadership, and is the author of the book Empty Nest Egg: Why You Must Start Your Own Business Now, and The Vigil, available on Amazon. Following his presentation, we will hear from Janet Tulley, who is the Assistant Dean for Enrollment and Student Services in the Won Suk Kim College of Fine Arts. As a proud Redbird alumni, Janet earned her degrees in music education, music theory, and composition, as well as college student personnel administration at Illinois State. Her interest in international collaboration stems from a desire to create additional avenues for creative research and to gain new perspectives and to forge new relationships. After both of our speakers have presented, I will moderate the Q&A session with them together. So without further ado, I will hand this off to Terry to begin the presentation today.
Thank you very much, Matt. We will be talking today a little bit about a program that we have in the College of Business in Panama. And I want to try to give you today a few insights into how the program came about, how the relationship was built, and I'm going to be pretty blunt and straightforward about some of the ups and downs of having a program like this. So hopefully by the end, you'll have kind of a flavor of what it's like to actually work with a partner university in another country to deliver a program in that country. The inception of this program was kind of a serendipitous event. There were two people, Oscar Leon, who is the president of Quality Leadership University in Panama City, Panama. And he and former administrator at ISU, Luis Canales, they had gone to school together at the University of Louisville. And so one day, apparently they had a conversation, and Oscar brought up the subject of a partnership. And so this conversation kind of got started, and that would have been between 5 and 6 years ago. And the conversation blossomed, and we decided, I really wasn't a part of the formation of the program because I wasn't in this position yet, but they initially put together an international business program, and that was an undergraduate program. So this was put together by my predecessor, Tim Longfellow, and Barb Ribbons, who is central to the program's functioning today. Barb played a tremendous role in getting the curriculum kind of worked out, because when you weave together two programs, it's not as easy as it looks at first, because you have two sets of administrative rules with two institutions. You also have the larger issue of how each country works. So Panama has different laws than the US does. and you have to make sure that you're satisfying the requirements of all of those regulations and laws, in addition to the kind of obvious things about weaving together a curriculum. So the program originally for international business was designed as, most people would call it a 2+2. So students will enroll in classes in Quality Leadership University at their campus there in Panama City. And they take 2 years of coursework. Some of the courses are delivered by QLU itself. And in other cases, universities like, for example, the University of Louisville also teach some undergraduate classes there. The program is designed so that the student rolls pretty much seamlessly into the BSIB program that we have set up. And so that all of that groundwork had to get laid before we could really start taking students through the program. One difference, though, between this 2+2 and some others is we actually go down there to teach. So students earn an ISU degree, and one big selling point, if you will, to students is they're actually getting taught by US professors coming down to do a business degree, which is highly valued. But it provides an opportunity for students who would otherwise not get a chance, for instance, to go to the United States for a couple of years to get a degree. So when this was coming together, my predecessor, Tim Longfellow, started a conversation about doing a similar program for the MBAs. And Oscar Leon wanted to do this as well. So we designed, and again, it was Dr. Longfellow that really put this together. It was the same basic structure, except there's really not a feed from undergraduate to graduate like there is in the undergraduate program. It's just an MBA program. But again, our professors, when we don't have a pandemic, actually go down there in person to deliver those classes. The mechanics of the program are relatively straightforward. We just have a cohort model, lockstep, some people would call it. Everybody starts at the same time. Everybody goes through and takes the same courses. We do our staffing from each of our 4 departments in the College of Business. Each is an interdisciplinary program, so it's not just housed in one department. It's kind of spread out among all 4. The model we use is courses are either 4 or 5 weeks, depending on whether they're undergraduate or MBA. And 2 of those weeks for each of those courses is in-person presence with one of our instructors. So they go down there and they actually stay for 2 weeks. And almost universally, the feedback from instructors has been that they love going there and they really love the students. The things that are difficult is we knew going in, and this is about the point where I did start to get at least cognizant of the program, was we needed to handle how instructors were going to be able to teach in Panama City at the same time they have their classes back here. So we kind of all got together and with department chairs and the dean's office and faculty members, and we established that we understand that during the time that you're actually in Panama, you may handle your classes remotely from Panama City. Now, let's recall this was before COVID. That doesn't sound so strange now. We've been doing it for going on 2 years. But we had to make sure, in addition to handling their home classes, what instructors, that they knew what to expect. So there's the logistics. Some people have traveled a lot, some people have not. So what do you have to do to get into Panama? You know, do you have to have a visa? The answer is no, in most cases. You know, how are we going to arrange the logistics? Where will you stay? How will you get taken care of? How will you get back and forth to the actual university buildings and so forth? We also try to at least once or twice a year get together with instructors who are going to be teaching in the program, because the cultural norms are a bit different in Panama. Now, this hasn't proven to be a really big problem. In fact, it's part of what we teach, especially in the international business program. How do you make adjustments on both ends of a transaction to adjust to each other's culture? Some of the things that we run into is in general, both students and administrators in Panama have a different sense of time, for example, especially when it comes to deadlines. So the word deadline means one thing to us in the US. In a Panamanian culture, in the larger Latin American culture, that can mean something quite different. And so we tell our instructors that you're going to have some adjustments to make, both with students and with the folks that are supporting you down there. But they've been able to navigate that quite well. We just want to make sure that they don't get blindsided by the differences. We also work to have emergency measures in place. We're continually refining how to make sure that instructors feel safe going down there. Panama City is quite safe. We're not worried about it being a dangerous situation. But if an emergency happened, we want to make sure that we're ready so that we know who gets contacted and how we take care of things and so forth. I have a very, very good working relationship with my counterpart, Maria Alejandra Quintero. And we work together constantly managing student issues. Occasionally we have an instructor issue we have to talk about. The last couple of years, as you might imagine, we've worked with COVID, and we also have been doing some technology upgrades to enable us to do HyFlex classroom delivery in the buildings down there in Panama City. So I'll talk about that again in just a moment, but that is critical. If I didn't have this really close working relationship with Maria Alejandra, we just couldn't do this program. The benefits for the students are tremendous. They get an opportunity to earn a U.S. degree without leaving Panama. And that's a big opportunity, and especially in the case of business degrees, they are highly valued when they're from the United States. The program is more affordable for most people than coming to ISU in person, though we welcome that, and some students choose to do that. It's quite a bit easier to manage financially for students in Panama. The professors really love it because they get exposure to teaching in another country. As I said, it's almost universally a positive experience for professors. And the students get to learn some things about US business culture as well. So they have to adjust to our culture as well when they're in the classroom. In the future, we'd like to extend our reach to more of Central and South America, with either similar models or models that use QLU kind of as a linchpin between the US and Latin American countries for programs. And we'll also be working to extend HyFlex to reach other areas in Central and South America, possibly from the Panamanian classrooms we have set up with QLU. I think the final takeaway for me is you have to get that curriculum set up. Now, you can't fix every problem ahead of time, but you have to put a lot of thought into how you're going to set up that curriculum, especially if you've got a situation where you've got prerequisites and so forth. Working with the Office of International Engagement is key. They know a lot about working with folks in other countries, and working with the registrar is key. We went through some growing pains the first year or two that I was in this position of trying just to get applications processed in a way that was not unduly burdensome for anybody along the way. There's just no substitute for the close, regular work with your counterparts. You've got to build those relationships, because believe you me, you're going to be on WhatsApp or chat or email with those folks a lot more than you think you will, solving day-to-day problems. And if you don't have that working relationship, it can be very, very difficult. The same goes for your colleagues here at ISU. I could not do this without Barb Ribbons. She in the IB program is just a tremendous asset. And since she was an integral part of building the program, She knows things that I just can't have a day-to-day knowledge of the details on. So you got to make sure that you build your team at home as well. The moment at which you'll know all of the effort that goes into an international program like this is worth it, when you see those students at their commencement with their families, you'll know that it was worth every bit of trouble that you went through to get that program up, running, and delivered. So on that note, I'd like to hand this over to my friend and colleague, Janet Tulley.
Thank you, Terry. I hopefully will not duplicate what Terry said, but rather emphasize what he said with the program that I am going to describe. I am going to talk about our Illinois State University and Shanghai Normal University Tiananmen College graphic design program. And like Terry, I can't emphasize enough that it really is not the work of one, but rather a multitude of individuals who come together to make this happen. And so this little word cloud I put together just off the top of my head, not putting names in, but putting positions in terms of who was a player in what we have done. And so I just want to say that I am merely relaying a story of this group of individuals who have worked tirelessly for the success of expanding international relations at ISU in the name of international partnership between our university and then Tiananmen, Shanghai. And the program involves graphic design specifically, so it is just one particular portion of our School of Art. The program would not have been possible without Luis Canales, who formerly worked in OISP, as well as Emin Wang, Jonathan Rosenthal, who was our AVP, Jan Murphy, the provost, Larry Dietz, and I'm going to keep going just because I really want you to understand the gravity with which we had to partner. And I'm only going to name those here in Illinois. I'm not going to talk about those that are in China, but know that the list is equal in China as it is to what's here. Larry Dietz, who was our president at the time, Jean Miller, who's the dean of the college, Mike Willey, who's the director of the School of Art, Jeff Navros, the director of admissions, Joss Ray in the University Registrars, Kayla Carroll, international admissions and OISP, Eric Yeager, and our information security officers here at ISU, and then all of our Tiananmen partners. So I didn't mention academic advisors. I didn't talk about financial aid. I didn't talk about Into. All those folks were involved, as well as iHouse and Sammy Rental and other places. So let me talk a little bit about what our agreement is. We have a 3.1 agreement in graphic design, as I mentioned. They did 3 years in Shanghai and 1 year here in Normal. As we went through the program, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, we changed that where they did 2 years in Shanghai, 1 year in Normal, and then 1 year in Shanghai again. So I'll talk about how that came to be. And then they earn a diploma both from Illinois State and from Shanghai Normal University, Tiananmen, which was really important to them and to us, because we thought if we are going to be a part of this, it was really important to have that viable connection that would follow them through their future careers. And then part of our agreement is that students must be English proficient by year 3. So that would be the year prior to them coming to campus. That's when we would say, what is your TOEFL exam score, for example? And are you proficient to come to the university? So obviously part of this agreement is that they are studying English while they are attending their first couple of years at Tiananmen. And then the students must pass an entrance portfolio. That's the same for all of our graphic design students and all of our art students. They have to do that portfolio review in order to get into the program. So in order to stay true to our art agreement and our art students, and to make sure that they're on the same level as our art students, that's why we initiated that. The good news is they were studying, or they are studying throughout their whole plan of study art in preparation for that portfolio, and that served them well. So like Terry, I am going to be very blunt and honest in my description of what we encountered, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? Every good movie line should be used in a presentation once. And then, so first and foremost, I think when you're thinking about a future partnership, location, 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 right? Choose wisely. And that's not to say that we've regrets where we chose. However, in order to communicate, whether that's taking classes, whether that's making preparations, whether that's talking about student concerns, just trying to host meetings, that type of thing. It's a 13-hour difference between here and Shanghai. In terms of flight time, it's 1 day and 6 hours. So, you know, if in reflecting back, was that a great choice? I'm not sure if all of us had to do it again, is that the partner that we would choose merely for that reason alone? It has just made things quite difficult when we're talking about such a significant time change. And for the students that are in the audience that are from China, I absolutely have a lot of empathy with you talking to your friends and family back home. The other consideration that we suggest you have when determining partners is how attractive is it for your partner students to study in the United States? In China, it is highly attractive for students to go on to the United States and study. And so that was one of our rationale in choosing a partnership within China. It makes it easier in recruiting students. Students want to come to campus. They want to come to the United States. Families want them to come to the United States. Their university partners want them to come to the United States. And that makes for a much easier conversation. Not as much of us convincing the university of, oh, yes, you should partner with us because the United States has these things. It was more so just saying we are an option for you in the United States. So really, really excited about the opportunities that we can afford and China opening their arms to us in that regard. I would say that an exploratory trip is absolutely essential. Just like Terry described, Luis had traveled to Tsinghua as well as other universities to see what is out there, to see what would be great partners. And what was highly attractive about Shanghai Normal University in Tsinghua is their attention to technology and technology in the arts. As you can imagine, in Shanghai, it is an urban experience. And they found that the technology was absolutely exquisite. And that was a place that really piqued Luis, the interest of, in particular, our art folks in graphic design because of the opportunities that could be afforded to those students. Email exchange between the disciplinary stakeholders is also essential, and it's not just email exchanges, right? But it is phone calls or WeChats or exchanging large documents, that type of thing. And stakeholders aren't just all the folks that I previously mentioned, but really there's typically a person that drives a program home. So in this instance, that person was Mike Willey, the director of the Wansu Kim School of Art. And then we had a similar partner to the graphic design program in Shanghai. And then finally, we can't emphasize enough, stakeholder visits are essential. Know that when you're trying to get a program off the ground, you will visit. They will visit. And it may not just be once, it may happen numerous times. So speaking of stakeholder visits, you can see our former president, or President Emeritus, Larry Dietz. He is here in China, and you can almost see their seal behind his elbow there, and Illinois State seal. So here he is addressing dignitaries and students who have come to kick off the program. This was in 2017, and our partnership started then. It started early in that calendar year, so right after the start of their term in January. And at that time, we had the president, the provost, the AVP of undergraduate studies, the director of OISP, currently OIE, director of admissions, the Asian partnerships person, our international admissions rep, the Dean of Fine Arts, and the School of Art director all visited in 2017. So I would say thinking about your budget is going to be essential, because a trip to China for that many folks is necessary, or was necessary for us, and it comes with a price tag. So ideally that price tag is going to pay off in the long run, but I just mentioned that it's, it's not cheap to fly so many folks around the world to make a program so viable as one that we hoped would come of this. And so here you see a map of Illinois State University's campus being reflected in front of prospective students in China. And you have Jeff Mavros, the director of admissions, is on the stage individually. And then the other gentleman with the microphone is the graphic design contact and partner that we have in China. And so Jeff's role, and bless him for doing this, he does it so well, was just as an admissions director, to go with the energy that Jeff has to make these prospective students excited and want to attend Illinois State University. And what's cool about this is that telling students, hey, come to the United States is one thing, right? You say, come to Illinois State University, frequently Illinois brings to mind the idea of Chicago, right? And the landscape in Normal is not the same as the landscape in Chicago. So we really had to relay to them through this type of imagery, what is Illinois State University? So we paid a lot of attention to that in providing really rich images of what happens here on campus, and not only on campus, but around campus, wind turbines and farmland and that type of thing, in addition to the metropolitan area where we have hospitals and we have shopping and we have, things at our ready access. So trying to convey that internationally was a challenge for us, but also something that we really tried to embrace with fantastic conversation and imagery. In addition to Jeff's conversation, simultaneous to that, we had sent over Kayla Carroll, and she was walking the student cohort through application and visa process and TOEFL scores and housing and those types of things. So know that it's not just about the academics, though academics are truly important and necessary and essential to the success of the program, but there's so much more. So relying on the campus partners who have far more experience and knowledge is integral to the success. So while these types of formal meetings were occurring that you see Jeff Mavros doing here, we also had more informal meetings that were occurring simultaneous, the course mapping that Terry mentioned. Here is Bao and Mike Willie sitting down with the courses that are offered at both universities and saying, what does it look like? When is it offered? How are we actually going to get this off and running and successful with timing wise? And then, by the way, these students from China had to learn English at a level that they could come and study in the United States. And culturally, that was significant for these art students because of the way the Chinese education system is, to my understanding, that the emphasis would not necessarily be on language on secondary language if you're learning the arts. And so that was something that was added into the courses that were necessary in order to participate in this particular program. So it was an intensive language program in addition to the art skill sets that would prepare them to come to the United States. And so what our faculty are involved as well. And what we do is we send our faculty to China for our winter breaks and then our summer breaks. And they teach classes that are quite condensed. So just like our winter and summer sessions, very much the same type of thing when our faculty go there to teach these students. I'll talk a little bit about what the impact was through COVID, and hopefully we won't ever have to worry about that again, right? Like that's just was an anomaly, and we won't have another worry where we're going to have to readjust for a couple of years. but know that our faculty did go in country and do go in country for this program. And it was actually incredibly lucrative. Shanghai Tianhua they were really great at helping fund our faculty to teach their students, which made it really attractive for our faculty to want to go. So not everybody, I think as Terry mentioned, is hip to traveling or has a lot of experience with that. And perhaps they've not had the pleasure to go to China before. And so if nothing but pay alone, this program was quite attractive for our faculty who want to go to China. So after we had that formal wooing session, right? Here are, again, Mike Willie, he's back in China again, right? And he's selling our university and our state of Illinois and our town of Normal and the country. And I just say that because, again, sometimes when we say, oh, Illinois State University, it's so similarly named to the University of Illinois, which helped us to our advantage because there's a lot of name recognition in China for University of Illinois. And so when they heard Illinois State University, they kind of swapped all the names in the words in their head, and they said, oh, this is a great place to go. So they were highly excited when they heard about Illinois State University and wanting to be here. One of the things that I would say that's important for creating a new program is to set benchmarks. Benchmarks are essential for the success of the program to know, are we on the right trajectory? Does this partnership work? Are we sowing the seeds that we've planted, or is it time to add fertilizer, or is it time to pull out the dead-headed flowers? You know, so setting those benchmarks for a month out, a year out, 2 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out is really paying attention to the health and well-being of the program. And that's not only for our sake at Illinois State University and within our graphic design program and fiscal responsibility, et cetera, but then also being respectful of the students within the program. Are they meeting our objectives academically? Are they meeting the objectives for the language that we set out for them to learn? Are they being placed appropriately in country or in our country, in China or in the United States, in graphic design, et cetera. So having those benchmarks set out from the onset makes future conversations a little easier about what next, how are things going. Let me talk a little bit about including the faculty. Our first faculty, this was our first faculty cohort, and you can see this was in fall of 2017. They went on an exploratory visit, so they weren't yet going to be there. They were going to go in January of 2018 to teach. Actually, it's the December 2017, January 2018. And so they went and they toured classrooms, and they were there to source art supplies because it's not like they can call Amazon and have that delivered here, or however our students are getting their supplies independently. They were looking at current student art portfolio work just to see where is the beginning level of these particular students. They were observing art classes that were in existence on campus, talking with faculty, looking at graphic design within country, and then also speaking with their graphic design faculty that existed at Tianhua. So they really delved deep into what does this look like in the classroom and at this university, and what are the students like getting to know them? And what did they find? So it was really an exciting and eye-opening trip for them. As Terry mentioned, that culturally speaking, things are not always the same in the United States. We have grown accustomed to the way education is delivered here, and what they found were classrooms that weren't heated at all, except on rare occasion when dignitaries were in attendance. And these visiting teachers were not dignitaries. And so they were there, and the temperatures in the classrooms were in the 30s on a regular basis. And what happens when you're dealing with art making products is that some of those products don't work well in cold air. And so that was a consideration that we had, that no one had predicted, that it was like, oh, look, no heat. So that was something that we later had to negotiate, as could we get some heat in the classroom? And that was really for artistic reasons, so that the materials that they were using were going to work okay. At this particular university, the students were permitted to smoke in the classroom. And again, handling the art materials, it just is not safe to do that. So if you have caustic materials or paints and paint thinners and that type of thing, not a good idea to pair that with cigarettes. So that was another unanticipated surprise. Students were not engaged in class like the American educated students were. And so that was just one of those learning curve situations where the faculty had to adapt to that culture. It was not atypical to see students sleeping in the classroom, and that was not addressed by faculty. So really learning how to work within the expectations of what the students have come to know at this particular university. They discovered that language was a huge barrier. The students that they would be teaching in a mere 2 months after this particular visit were not even close to having the language skill set necessary for these teachers who only were able to communicate in English, not in Mandarin, when they visited a couple of months later. And so they realized that they were going to need translators. And the need for translators wasn't such a surprise. But what they then ultimately found is that the translators would take liberties with what was said. And so even though they didn't speak Mandarin, they know that if they said a whole paragraph of information, and then the translator would repeat something, and it would just be about the length of a sentence, they had a good inkling that things were not being translated appropriately. So working with the translators, and they're finding the quality translators that were going to be essential for the course delivery. And then amenities, a quick story. We had a faculty member who was vegetarian who visited. And one of the students was so kind to them and showed them around and was respectful of the faculty member's vegetarian needs, and served them, ordered for them blood soup. And the intent was that there was no meat in this blood soup, right? I mean, no meat. And the faculty member was so gracious and ate the soup. But it was one of those that just remembering that we aren't in the United States anymore, and the expectations have to be adjusted in order to really meet us where we are. So speaking of acculturation in China, these same faculty are tasked with teaching Western art history, for example. Well, Western art history, the students have no foundational concept, or at least they found at this university, no foundational concept of the work. Because we think of Christianity, and not even think, that is what Western art history is based upon, is Christianity and the Renaissance and those types of things. And so without that foundational history of history, faculty had to rewrite syllabi and rubrics in order to compensate, to provide that foundational experience for the students before they could move on to talking about this, so they can move on to talking about designing letters based upon what you see here in graphic design. So there really was a gap in understanding in the culture. Let me look at my notes to make sure I'm not missing anything. Oh, I will also say that it's really imperative as you decide on what schools to partner with or what nations to partner with, paying attention to when is the school start and end time, the semester, the quarter, the trimesters, their grading systems, and then also their holidays. Does that pair well with what you want to do? So beyond, that the 13-hour time difference, et cetera, the culture, et cetera, being mindful of that, because it may not always work out in your favor. And then also realizing that the registrar is your best friend, and both at Illinois State University and then the other university. We were are very excited to have graduate students participate in this experience. Our graduate students traveled regularly to Shanghai for this program. Some of the things that we had to do were figure out how to compensate the graduate students. And mind you, this was before the graduate union. And so I just mentioned that because the rules were different at the time than they are today. So getting them paid was first and foremost our goal. And again, it was incredibly lucrative for our students. They didn't pay to go, they were paid to go. So it was awesome. And as you can imagine, our graduate students really wanted to travel to China. So here we have some faculty and some graduate students that had traveled with another cohort. Determining their technology needs was essential. Some of the technology that is not readily accessible, though you can use a VPN to get to these Gmail and Google apps and Dropbox and Microsoft and OneDrive and all the social medias, the Twitter, the Instagram, Snapchats, YouTubes, and all of that. None of that was accessible, which was also highly interesting because when we're talking about graphic design, there's really giant files that we have to communicate. And so when you send a PDF, sometimes, it gets to be really large. And those are the types of files that we were talking about. So really learning how can we research, how can we share information, and how can we really get into these enormous sized files and communicate well and efficiently within China was definitely a little bit of a challenge. Let me talk, speaking of that challenge, a little bit about technology. I mentioned in that opening slide that our information security officer was a big deal for us. And that is true. China is considered high risk for information security. And so we had to buy dedicated computers that were only for use in China travel for our faculty and graduate students that went. The computers could not be encrypted because that's ISU's rule for any computer that's owned by us. No personal information could be on the computer. There could be nothing on the computer. It had to be stripped of any identifying information that could compromise university data. So I want to say that working with information security is important. It's not something that had previously been done prior to us doing this. We were so excited. Our first cohort of in country, so in Tiananmen, 60 students were signed up to start the program. And with every program, it's not going to end up that way, but oh my gosh, we were over the moon excited and thought, what are we going to do? We don't have room for all these students. So super exciting that this is how it all began. So this was our first cohort, all the smiling faces, all looking to be Tiananmen Redbirds. Super cool. So what didn't we anticipate? We didn't anticipate that in 2018, the USA immigrant border closings were going to occur, that in 2017, there was a Chinese visiting scholar at U of I that was kidnapped and ultimately found deceased. We didn't anticipate that there were going to be trade wars that were going to occur, that were going to impact everybody. That happened in 2018. And we didn't expect COVID and the China ban for travel that occurred in 2020, right? These are all things that you go into such a program with great optimism, and then these things occur. And it really happened, one after another in succession, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. So we're kind of seeing a wane in our optimism from that giant class that we started with. So what did we learn? We learned that you need to set up program goals, you need to assess, reassess, and evaluate. Partnerships and commitment are absolutely essential to the success. Cultural awareness is 100% part of the game. And then some things are just far beyond your control. And so at this point in our program, we haven't yet had anybody graduate. And we haven't yet had anybody come to Illinois. We've had one person come to Illinois State University from that cohort. We had to move everything online as a result of COVID. So that's a little bit rough. And that prevented folks from coming here. And as you can imagine, if you're a student that's attracted to a program because you can go to the United States and study, and then you can't go to the United States and study, it really, really kind of squelches that excitement. So we are still in it to win it. We're still hopeful for the future. But at this point, we're still trying to pull out of COVID and get our feet back on the ground with our TN Web partners.
All right, Janet, Terry, thank you very, very much for your incredibly informative presentations. To the audience, we will now begin taking your questions. I see that we already have some questions in our Q&A, so please, again, if you have questions for our presenters, please put them into our Q&A function and we will relay them to our wonderful presenters. So without further ado, and I think this is for both of you, so I'll let you guys decide who wants to go first. But actually, for Terry, do the Panama students pay an international tuition fee? Do they pay for themselves or their government? Does their government pay the tuition and fees?
So it's a contractual arrangement, and all of the financial transactions take place with Quality Leadership University. Then in turn, Quality Leadership University has an arrangement with us at ISU. So from the student's point of view, they're in an arrangement with QLU. Matt, do you want to read those, or you want me to?
Yeah, I'm just going to go through these, and then I think we'll see if there are some other things that we may want to add in on the Shanghai side. Do students take an English language test? So do the Panamanian students take an English language test?
Yes, like any international student, there's an English language proficiency, and that applies both to the IB program and the MBA program.
Okay, and then on the other end, do the MBA students at ISU take a language proficiency test for Panama or for QLU?
Okay, you lost me on that one. Like, do our students, do our English speaking students take a test for there? Is that what you were saying?
Oh, no, I apologize. I misread it. So the MBA students have to meet the same requirements. And I think
that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I apologize. I was thinking.
That's all right. No problem.
For programs, do faculty get extra compensation, or is it part of their considered course load?
Well, I won't get into all of the details of the arrangement, but we worked this out so that it's volunteer on the part of faculty members. I work through department chairs to get people who are interested in teaching particular classes, but that is not a normal part of their load. It's something that's extra, and we work out the compensation accordingly.
Okay. All right. How long did it take to establish the MOU for your program?
I talked to Dr. Ribbons about this one time. I think it was probably a year to a year and a half to actually work out the details of how everything was going to fit together. It was quite a bit of that was hidden in the details of the curriculum.
Okay. And then transitioning over to Jen, how long for the MOU for Shanghai?
It was about 11 months.
Okay. All right. And then for the Shanghai Normal ISU partnership, how were credit transfers required for students to complete their dual degrees? How did that work?
So that was through the course mapping. We arranged that. It's a lot like what had occurred in INTO, where we had plans of study that we pre-agreed upon. Now, there were general education classes. Students had to pass all their classes at Shanghai in order for them to count here. But we did agree upon kind of general education, as well as what they would be taking in country beyond general education in Shanghai, and then what they would have remaining here at Illinois State University. So those were prearranged agreements that we had. If students did fail, it didn't make them out of the program, it just made them have deficiencies that they were going to have to compensate for when they either before they came here or when they arrived here.
Okay. And then how many faculty were involved in your program, Janet?
Oh gosh, we still have faculty, we say going, right? None of them are going because we've not been able to go, but we still have faculty that are doing that. So we typically have two and two. So it's two faculty and 2 graduate assistants that are working in the winter session and then in the summer session, so to speak. And they don't exactly align with what Illinois State does, but in terms of that, that's what it is. And it is, like Terry, it's on a voluntary basis, and they're well compensated, and it is extra pay above and beyond their load.
And then Terry, turning it back to you again, just to double, how many faculty are involved in that program?
Oh, cool. Well, I haven't stopped to count, but each program will have 12 to 14 courses. And so you can count on probably there being a different faculty member. Occasionally we'll have the same faculty member teaching 2 different courses in the program. And we have some overlap between MBA and IB. So I would guess probably 15 or 20 faculty total overall.
Okay, and then back to Janet. Did you have to handle situations where the students from the China program no longer wanted to participate in the program due to not being able to travel to the US?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, that beginning cohort of 60, we're whittled down to 1 student that's here on campus. So absolutely. And, due to all those factors that I mentioned in that one slide that were really beyond our control. And they still can't really travel in country unless, they're able to get here, which is really tricky.
Okay. And then how long did ISU faculty teach physically at Shanghai?
Yeah, so anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. So it depends what section or what time of year they were there, but 4 to 8 weeks.
Okay. And then Terry, for you as well, about how long were the faculty teaching physically at QLU?
The way we work it is they're down 2 weeks in the IB program for undergraduates. It's 2 weeks together in the middle of a 4-week course. In the MBA courses, it's 2 weeks, but they're the second and the 4th week of a 5-week course. That middle 3rd week, they get an option. If they choose to, they can stay in Panama. And if they want to, they can come back and then fly back. So, some people decide they'll just stay there for that week instead of trying to come back and make 2 extra trips.
Okay. And this question, I think, is kind of to you both. Our participant says, I'm interested in being a full-time faculty member someday and teaching abroad sometime for a semester at a time. I feel like my field is not as internationally friendly as international business or art. But I'm a PhD student in math education. Any thoughts about that or that opportunity, or just your reflections on how that would go?
Well, I would, I don't want to speak for the higher administration, but ISU is trying very hard to become a more international university. And so as we understand it here in the College of Business, any legitimate effort to try to extend our reach across the globe is welcome. So my guess is that we're going to see more activity in all kinds of areas across campus and trying to establish these types of international partnerships and programs. So I'm, for one, optimistic. I think it's a good direction, and we're trying to do our part to contribute to that effort.
I'll turn it over to Janet real.
Yeah. I would answer a little different and say, with an aspiring higher education professional, right, a faculty member, working when you're seeking a position, I think finding a university that values internationalization and international education would be key, because I don't think that I would say, no, you can't do math education in abroad. I think of a particular instance, we have some faculty-led study abroad in art teacher education, actually. And I know it's a little bit different than a partnership, but I could envision this becoming a partnership just because of how well received it is, both to our students and the students that are in that particular country. So I would say, look for that as you aspire for a position, but then also know that I think that I wouldn't say, oh, this particular discipline is off the table. I don't think that's the fact. If you can think it, I think you can make it happen.
And just speaking from the newly branded Office of International Engagement's perspective, as Terry said, we're looking for those opportunities. We want to grow those out. So I think that will be an expanding area for not just our institution, but a lot of higher education towards the future. So there is hope there. I will leave it open for one more minute here just to see if there are any last questions from the audience. Okay. So that will conclude our series presentation for today. If we didn't get to your question, please feel free to email internationalseminar@ilstu.edu, and we will be happy to relay those questions to our presenters after hours so that they can get back to you and make sure that your question does get answered. We would like to deeply thank Dr. Noel and Janet for being with us here today. We truly appreciate you sharing all of your insights and experience on how these are set up. And they are very complicated arrangements. So we know that there's a lot that are put into international institutional collaborations. And like I said, we appreciate you sharing your insights. So thank you both very much for joining us today. I appreciate it. We also want to thank all of those of you who are in the audience today. We are proud to be able to offer this program to the ISU community and to the Bloomington Normal community. And we would not be able to do this program without your support and attendance. So thank you all for joining us. It really is a pleasure to do the International Seminar Series. And again, we hope to be able to continue this in the future. Next week is the final event in our spring 2022 International Series. This event will be offered in person as well as simultaneously online. So if you would like to join us in person next week, please make sure to register. The featured speaker will be the ISU Provost, Dr. Endeavor Tarhule. He will be joining us again to talk about his vision for the future of international engagement here at Illinois State University. So to register, please visit illinoisstate.edu/seminar series. But make sure, like I said, that if you would like to join us in person for that event, that you are able to do so. If you're not able to join us in person, we will still be live streaming the event as well, and we'll do the Q&A through the live stream. So stay safe, stay healthy, and go Redbirds. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. It was a pleasure to do this, and take care.